There's a quiet illusion that follows most men into intimacy that, if they say the right things, kiss her just so, and touch her in all the ways the movies taught them, she'll dissolve into their arms. But that's not how it works. That script is shallow, and more importantly, it's wrong. Because real desire doesn't ignite on the skin, it ignites in the mind, especially in women who possess depth, discernment, and a rich inner world. These are not women who respond to performance. They respond to presence, to psychological texture, to a man who doesn't just reach for her body but resonates with her being. Long before her body even considers surrendering, her unconscious has already taken measure of you, deciding whether you are a place she can open or a moment she'll move on from. Touch might be the entry, but meaning is the key. You see, modern men are often taught a mechanical script. Touch here, say this, escalate now. But real eroticism doesn't follow a playbook. It's not a series of events. It's a psychological atmosphere, a well-crafted emotional climate. The rare man isn't the one who seduces her with a perfect line. He's the one who makes her feel seen before she's even fully exposed. He creates emotional tension, not chaos. And he generates anticipation, not pressure. Because if we're honest, most men will have sex in their lifetime, but very few will ever know what it means to be replayed in a woman's mind on a loop, to live in her fantasy when she's far from you, to be the one she can't stop thinking about, not because you touched her, but because you never even had to. That's not a game. That's psychological resonance. The first step? Understanding what psychologists sometimes refer to as the paradox of female arousal. While male desire can be immediate, reactive, and even primitive, female arousal is layered, responsive, and slow-burning. For a woman to fully awaken to her erotic energy, she needs to feel, not just sexually, but emotionally, mentally, symbolically. She needs to feel a story, not just stimulation. So you don't rush to her body. You don't leap to conclusions. You let her live in the mystery. Because mystery, unlike certainty, breathes oxygen into the fire of feminine craving. Let's say you're sitting beside her. The ordinary man invades space, touches too soon, speaks too quickly, and overperforms. But the man who understands the power of silence knows the real move is restraint. You let your knee barely brush hers. You don't look at her right away. You just let her feel your presence. Then, when the silence has weight, you meet her eyes. Not with hunger, but with calm, with containment. And then, you look away. What just happened wasn't physical. It was psychic. You didn't grope her. You didn't perform for her. But now, you've planted a seed in her unconscious. You've become a question she has to answer. Why did that feel different? Why did that moment linger? The craving doesn't come from what you gave her, but from what you withheld. That is the architecture of psychological attraction. And the deeper layer of this attraction is emotional priming. In psychology, there's a concept called affective priming. It means that a person's current emotional state sets the tone for how they interpret and respond to future stimuli. In other words, if you shift how she feels, you shift how she reacts. The mistake most men make is waiting until the moment they're alone with her to try and build the energy. But by then, her emotional filter is already set. If she's distracted, anxious, or just mentally tired, you're fighting uphill. But if you've already shifted her emotional atmosphere before she even sees you, everything becomes easier. And it's subtle. It's not about performing dominance or sending her paragraphs. It's about psychological suggestion. A simple message earlier in the day. Don't be late. I've got plans for you. Doesn't scream lust. It whispers it. It hints that you know something she doesn't. And because her mind is naturally wired to complete unfinished stories, she starts to imagine. She wonders. She fills in the blanks. Not because you fed her a fantasy, but because you triggered one inside her. This is the genius of the emotionally attuned man. He understands that her body doesn't respond to force. It responds to the energy behind his restraint. Later, you send a follow-up. No emojis, no dramatics, just, "You've been on my mind all day, but I'll show you later." Again, you didn't ask. You didn't flatter. You didn't even explain. But now, you've invaded her thought stream. You've created a loop, a feedback circuit in her emotional cortex. where your presence becomes her preoccupation. And it's important to pause here and reflect. This isn't about manipulation. This is about resonance, about matching her emotional rhythm and gently leading it to a higher frequency. Because if she's craving you, it's not because you took control of her will. It's because you tuned yourself into her anima, the feminine soul image that longs to be mirrored. And this brings us to the next level: tension. The erotic doesn't exist in climax. It exists in a buildup, in the space between the move and the moment, in what's delayed, not given. Most men feel pressure to escalate, touch more, say more, and do more. But the truly magnetic man knows, doing less with more presence creates infinitely more craving than performing more with less depth. Picture this. She leans toward you. She's waiting. Most men collapse in that space. They see an invitation and rush to fulfill it. But you lean back. You smile faintly. You look at her and say, "You're not ready for what I'm thinking." That sentence, it doesn't just arouse her curiosity, it arouses her insecurity most subtly. Because now she's chasing your meaning. She's leaning into your imagination. And you're no longer someone she's observing. You're someone she's trying to decode. Tension, at its core, is the space between stimulus and fulfillment. It's the ability to remain calm in the face of desire. And that calmness, that masculine restraint, it creates a vacuum, a kind of energetic pull that makes her lean in even more. You're not trying to impress. You're not trying to prove. You're grounded, silent, intentional. That's what creates gravity, the emotional kind that makes her body remember your energy long after the night is over. And that's just the beginning. Real emotional intimacy begins in the spaces where most men grow silent, not because they're grounded, but because they've run out of things to say. And that silence is not power, it's absence. Women feel this absence immediately, even if they don't name it. Because a woman doesn't respond to noise, she responds to meaning. The truth is, she's not listening for words. She's listening for what lives behind them: the tone, the presence, the certainty in your voice, the restraint in your energy. That's what her nervous system reacts to. That's what determines if her guard will drop, or if she'll keep one foot out the door. Too many men try to earn a woman's desire through volume, talking more, texting more, explaining themselves endlessly. But desire doesn't grow in explanation. It grows in mystery. It grows in the subtle tension between presence and space. The man who doesn't rush to clarify, who doesn't panic when she pulls back emotionally, who doesn't react every time her energy shifts, that man becomes an anchor in a sea of men just trying to impress her. Think of it like this. Women aren't just attracted to strength. They're drawn to containment, to a kind of emotional gravity that says, "I can hold this moment. I don't need you to change. I'm not afraid of your emotion, or your silence, or your intensity." That's what Carl Jung meant when he spoke of the masculine container that allows the anima, the feminine soul image, to emerge. The anima cannot thrive in a man who needs constant reassurance. She doesn't open herself to a man who collapses at the first sign of emotional resistance. So imagine this scene. You're out with her. There's an attraction. There's chemistry. But suddenly, she grows distant. Not physically, but emotionally. Her gaze flickers elsewhere. Her tone changes. Her attention scatters. Most men, sensing this shift, will try to reclaim the energy. They ask, "What's wrong?" or "Did I do something?" In doing so, they hand her their emotional center. They make her the regulator of the dynamic. And in that moment, her desire begins to die, not because of anything she consciously feels, but because on a deep level, she can no longer relax in your presence. What do you do instead? You lean back. You don't chase her vibe. You don't try to win it back. You stay in your body, grounded and still. You meet her eyes and say calmly, "You're overthinking. Relax." Then you say nothing. That silence becomes the most dominant thing in the room. Not because it's cold, but because it's secure. You didn't try to fix her. You didn't try to explain yourself. You just told the moment what it was, and let it be. This is what women mean when they say they want a man who makes them feel safe. It's not just about physical protection. It's about emotional leadership. It's about a man who does not waver under the weight of her shifting moods. A man who doesn't internalize her anxiety, who doesn't confuse emotional containment with emotional detachment. Containment is not absence. It's presence without panic. And once she feels that, once her body realizes it's allowed to soften without needing to perform, everything changes. Because now, you're not the guy trying to get something from her. You're the guy who's already enough without her validation. And paradoxically, that's what makes her want to give you everything. But this kind of energy cannot be faked. It comes from inner stillness, from a man who has made peace with his shadows, who doesn't need a woman's attention to feel like a man, who has, in the Carl Jungian sense, integrated his anima, so he's not looking for it in her. And once this is in place, you unlock another layer of desire that most men never even realize exists: emotional understanding. Because the deepest craving a woman has is not to be touched, it's to be felt, not to be agreed with, but to be understood without needing to explain herself. This is where most men collapse, not because they don't care, but because they've been trained to relate logically, to solve problems, to offer solutions. But when a woman opens up emotionally, she's not handing you a puzzle. She's revealing a part of her emotional identity. She's asking, without saying it directly, "Can you meet me here? Can you hold this with me, not fix it, not analyze it, just feel it with me?" Let's break this down with an example. She's venting about work. She says, "I'm just so tired of always having to be the one who keeps everything together. No one even notices." The average man will say something like, "Well, maybe you should take a break." Or, "Just don't let it get to you." His intention is good, but his impact is disconnection, because those responses skip past her emotional reality. They go straight to logic, bypassing the feeling. Now, imagine the rare man. He listens, not with the intent to reply, but with the intent to feel. And when she finishes, he says, "Sounds like you've been carrying everyone else, and no one's carried you." That sentence changes everything. Not because it solves her problem, but because it reveals that you saw the truth behind her words. You mirrored the weight she's been holding. And for the first time in maybe weeks, she feels seen. Seen. And in that moment, her body starts responding in a way that has nothing to do with arousal in the traditional sense. Her heart opens, her breath deepens, her eyes soften, because now she doesn't feel like she has to perform to be understood. She doesn't have to seduce to be held. She doesn't have to test your empathy, because you've already passed the test she didn't even know she was giving. This is the kind of psychological intimacy that leads to unforgettable experiences. Not because the sex was wild or the touch was perfect, but because the emotional charge was undeniable. Because you created a space where she could fully relax into herself. And once a woman relaxes into herself around you, she will start to associate that version of herself with your presence. That's the secret. She doesn't crave you because of how you made her feel about you. She craves you because of how you made her feel about herself when she was with you. That's what gets replayed. That's what becomes addictive. That's what makes her wake up wondering why she can't stop thinking about you, even if you never laid a hand on her. And so many men never touch this level. They chase technique. They memorize lines. They perform seduction. But they don't understand the art of evoking, of creating emotional atmospheres where desire grows organically, because it feels safe, it feels charged, and it feels real. That's the difference between being remembered and being relived. So if you want her to crave you before you even touch her, you must master more than attraction. You must master emotional resonance. You must move differently. Speak less, feel more. Listen not to solve, but to reflect. Hold the silence. Say only what lands. Lead with calm. And most of all, remain grounded in the face of everything she throws at you. Because when a woman senses that nothing she does can shake your center, she finally permits herself to fall. And that is the beginning of everything. We often speak about attraction like it's a skill, something to learn, to refine, to control. And in many ways it is. But at its deepest level, attraction, true, lasting, soul-marking attraction, is a reflection, not of what you do to her, but of who you are when you're with her. Not of how well you play the game, but how deeply your presence resonates with something hidden inside her psyche, the anima. that eternal feminine part of the unconscious that longs to be recognized and released. When a woman is around you, she is not just reacting to you. She's responding to the parts of herself that you awaken. That's why so many men remain forgettable. They never access the deeper layers of the feminine. They trigger surface-level reactions, attention, politeness, maybe even brief arousal, but they never reach the part of her that lingers in silence, that aches in solitude, that replays a moment with no physical contact, because the energy behind that moment stirred something ancient. This is where the art of tension becomes sacred. Most men hear the word tension and think discomfort. They want to relieve it, to rush it. But tension, in the erotic sense, is not a problem. It's a gift. It's the pulse of the unknown, the breath between impulse and fulfillment. It's what draws the bowstring back before release. And when you master it, not through manipulation, but through energetic discipline, you no longer chase desire. You become the stage where it plays out. Let's take a scene. You're sitting beside her. The air is charged. She's leaned just a little closer. Her lips part like she's expecting something. Most men interpret this as permission. They take the bait. They kiss. They touch. They move. But the rare man, he waits. He doesn't withhold out of fear. He withholds from art. He looks at her, smirks, and says softly, "You're not ready for what I'm thinking." And then he goes quiet. That sentence is not about dominance. It's about invitation into her imagination. Now, she's leaning forward not to receive you, but to discover you. And in doing so, she discovers more of herself. Her inner world becomes electrified. Her body becomes the stage for a drama that you've orchestrated without even laying a finger. This is how the psychological merges with the erotic, through restraint, through stillness, through conscious timing. Because women don't fall in love with chaos. They fall in love with clarity. And clarity isn't loud, it's intentional. The man who knows how to build tension knows how to create meaning. Not with grand gestures, but with presence, with patience, with the ability to stay with the energy without rushing it to resolution. And then, there's the final pillar, emotional tone setting. A woman's nervous system doesn't open up to touch unless she feels emotionally secure. And that emotional safety doesn't come from comfort. It comes from your inner alignment, your congruence, your ability to speak without seeking validation, to lead without seeking control, to be strong without posturing, and soft without apologizing for it. When she's unsure, you don't match her hesitation. You become more still. When she's anxious, you don't question yourself. You breathe slower. When she pulls back, you don't reach. You stay rooted. And this emotional polarity is what creates gravitational pull. It's what makes her stop comparing you to other men, because you no longer feel like a man. You feel like an experience, one that pulls her deeper into her feminine embodiment. Let's say she's suddenly cold. Her responses are short. Her vibe is off. She's distant. What most men do in this moment is lean in. They start over-explaining, asking, "Are you okay?" Or, "Did I do something wrong?" But this makes her feel responsible for your emotional state. It's not only unattractive, it's exhausting. Instead, you maintain the frame. You lower your voice. You say, "You're safe. You don't have to figure it all out right now." Then you say nothing. You let the words hang in the air like perfume. And suddenly she softens. Not because you forced her to, but because she can feel that you're not trying to control her mood. You're anchoring her in yours. That's masculine security. It's the soil in which feminine surrender can bloom. But none of this works if you're disconnected from your emotional center. If you're looking for her to validate you. If you need her to open up before you feel safe. You must become what you want her to feel. Calm, unshakable, alive. Because here's the real paradox. When you stop trying to make her desire you, she starts craving you. When you stop chasing her approval, she starts chasing your energy. When you stop reaching and instead hold your line, that's when she lets go. You see, most men chase the peak, the physical climax, the validation, the win. But women remember the journey, the way you made her feel along the way, the unspoken connection, the unresolved tension, the emotional resonance that lingers long after the night ends. That's why the rare man doesn't chase unforgettable sex. He creates an unforgettable presence. And in doing so, he becomes the memory she returns to, not because it was perfect, but because it was profound. This is where everything comes full circle. The way to turn a woman on without touching her has nothing to do with tricks, nothing to do with lines, and everything to do with creating a space where she can feel more of herself when she's with you. Because in the end, she doesn't crave what you do to her. She craves what you awaken inside her. And if you can master that, if you can guide her through the corridors of her desire, not with pressure but with precision, not with noise but with presence, then she will associate that experience with you. And that, more than anything, is what makes a woman want you endlessly. Not your words, not your touch. It's the feeling she gets when you walk into a room and are silent, and everything inside her begins to stir. That's the true psychology of desire. That's the beginning of seduction that never ends. And that's how you become the man she feels like he still exists, long after the night is over.